Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast, where the truth will set you free.
Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast. Here we are with a great therapist panel, and I'm going to have them introduce themselves, starting with Marina.
Hi, my name is Marina. I'm licensed mental health counselor in Massachusetts.
Jake.
Hi, Jake Wiskerchen, marriage and family therapist in Northern Nevada.
Hi, I'm Sean Oosterlinck. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor in Indiana.
Megan.
I'm Megan Holder. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of South Carolina.
I'm Rebecca
Rebecca?
Moore. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Oregon.
Thank you, guys. Excited for this conversation. So I want to start off, the way a lot of us met is in these different communities online where therapists meet who did not fit with the mainstream of most other therapists. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with the political bias that we see in our field. And so I wanted to start off with what you're seeing in terms of political bias in the field of therapy, counseling, social work.
Did
So-
Ryan just freeze?
Yes.
Oh,
I know that.
that was a really abrupt ending there.
I was in grad school in 2015, 2016, and it's there that the things that we now know as woke were first being introduced to me. Probably seen some of it under the radar. I mean, things that were happening in the culture, but it was in grad school that I was first seeing things like critical race theory, systemic oppression, white guilt, and white privilege, and those kind of concepts, microaggressions, things like that. And as I was like seeing that in my textbooks and reading that in like my multicultural textbook, it was kind of blowing my mind because it all seemed really ridiculous and counter therapeutic. So that was some early exposure to it. I mean, that's like not almost 9 years ago now.
Yeah, I
And-
can relate. I absolutely seen the same thing in my grad school. I'm an immigrant, so I didn't grow up in that culture. And I believe it started a bit earlier than 2015. I was in science before, so it was less toward social sciences. But once I started master program in psychoanalysis, I was surprised how much people can forget what you were saying 5 minutes ago and start saying something that you learned that not yours, that's completely against what you were saying 5 minutes ago.
Marina,
And
where
how
are you from?
confident they are. I'm from Russia originally.
That's
Yeah,
interesting
and
to have your perspective.
Hmm?
I think that's very interesting to have your perspective.
yeah, I was like completely confused, like what's going on here. And it's kind of a lot of should-would thinking and a lot of labeling. And it's kind of remind me my childhood from Soviet Union when you explain how you should think, what you should say, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and how would you be punished for saying something wrong. And this deep feeling of afraid to be wrong, otherwise you get the consequences. So that's how I felt in
Yeah.
grad school.
I want to hear more about that because that's pretty striking to have somebody not. Yeah, it's almost like you were dropped into a pot of new water and you were like, I don't know what this is, right? But it apparently has a familiarity to you, and I'd like to hear more about that, honestly.
Mhm. Yeah, it feels like there is one opinion, and if you not agree with it, you're wrong. And it comes from professors, it comes from students, and they 100% sure. And this same feeling I had in school. Yeah, and often
That's
I
exactly
didn't
what we're taught
agree.
not to do.
Yeah,
Right.
and it's exactly what they say. Like, if you do not belong to any sort of minority, something wrong with you. You're guilty. It's your fault. And I was very confused. And I'm happy to learn that I'm not alone here.
What's interesting is my graduate school experience was a lot my bachelor's program and my graduate schooling was at the same place. And there was some, like, at that point I had heard kind of some of the stuff that was happening. 'Cause I had worked in the field for a long time, so I knew this kind of stuff was happening. But what's interesting is I didn't get any of that, like, woke policy stuff. And I think that was because the university that I went to, just by chance, is a small private Catholic university. And so really the only thing that they sort of talked about, and not even in a woke way, was gender dysphoria. But they didn't, they didn't, it was sort of a weird thing that had happened, because at one point I remember distinctly, in one of the classes it came up, and I was like, why are we not treating this like we would, like, body dysmorphic disorder? Like, what are we doing here? And the professor, she just was like, I don't know. I don't know. And so that was when I kind of realized, like, okay, this is a problem. Like, this is a problem, and nobody is doing anything about it. And her response was kind of almost in a, like, I think she kind of felt very defeated also by the way that things were going. And for the most part, I would say that a lot of the people in my cohort were, there was maybe one or two that were woke, but the rest of us were very, like, level-headed therapists. And so until I interacted actually with those two classmates, I I kind of almost didn't believe that there was real people like that out in the world that legitimately thought those things, and that it wasn't just some weird, like, thing that they were pushing. And I was like, because I think I naively thought back then, well, no therapist is going to buy into the fact that this is what we should be doing. Like, there's just no way, because it's totally illogical. And then I started realizing, oh my God, like, God help us, there are therapists that are buying into this, like, jumping into it with both feet, and we are screwed.
Megan?
Yeah. So I didn't think it was that bad in grad school. I graduated in 2016 from the University of South Carolina, and I was not the only conservative student in the cohort. Although there were a lot more liberal girls who were kind of just following all the, like, the left wing beliefs of that the side of the political spectrum. I feel like the professors stayed pretty neutral and were still at the time teaching a little bit the way old school was. I just lament that we didn't get a lot of good theory. But part of that might be because I was also going through a school counseling program. So I'm dually licensed as a licensed professional counselor and a school counselor. I work as a professional counselor now, but I was a school counselor for 6 years. And I can look back now at the textbooks and see where the KCREP and the Ask a National Model for School Counselors are, like, in bed together on the back end. And the whole time I was there, all they pushed was ask a national model. Go be a school counselor. Here's the model. Go implement this model. And at the time, I mean, it was just presented as a really neutral framework for, like, how to be a good school counselor. But now that I'm looking back at it, like, it is the critical race theory, social justice, Marxist theory that they kind of, like, like, it's the scaffolding for what has been implemented since. Like, in 2016, it's like they were laying the brickwork and not completely out front with it. And since 2016, like, ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, has come out with all of these really terrible, like, anti-parents' rights policies. Like, you're going to keep secrets from parents. You're the school counselor needs to act in loco parentis and assume the role of the parent, and we're protecting children from their parents, which like is only something that somebody who has terrible intentions for children ever thinks they need to do. And I think like since 2016, like ASCA has really flipped the switch and come out with the very hardline pro-transgender, but also pro-secretive, like anti-parent right policies, which are terrible.
I will rewind it just a bit further because I graduated in 2011 with my counseling degree. And prior to that, I graduated in 2008 with my master's in educational leadership. So it was hot for higher ed administration, but I got a lot of K-12 stuff as well. And that did not exist in 2006 to 2008. There were flavors of Paulo Freire and let's make sure we're not marginalizing the already marginalized, right? Which sounds fine at the time, and I'm sure it's fine still if that's where it stopped. Elevating people, but I can tell you that from a school perspective, we absolutely looked at the in loco parentis language and said we don't do that, right? Like that was the
Hello?
absolute clear bright line. We are no longer that. That used to be a thing back in the day, but now it's swinging back. And I know that because I work with school counselors who are dual licensed all the time. And then in the grad program, just a few years later, I had a really strong compare contrast because my undergrad was at the same institution, which is the University of Nevada here in Reno. And because I have 3 degrees because I love student loan debt. But I went through a really good, what I would consider a really remarkable cross-cultural education in undergrad due to some people that I was around and some advisors and mentors. So I get to grad school and I'm like, I've already got this licked. Like, I'm the white guy. I know my place. I also know what everybody else is doing. No. It was a completely different world. And I simply had not been shamed enough. And I dared, to my chagrin, speak out of that alleged experience from what was 10 years earlier. And it was amazing how quickly I got put in my place because I dared to step outside of the paradigm of diversity is only sex, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. I was like, well, what about poverty? What about different religions? What about, I just started throwing these things out, and I got called all sorts of names that make you shut up when you're a student, like,
Wow.
privileged and white male who doesn't know any better, and, shut your tongue down. But it still wasn't to the point of indoctrination like it is now. And I've been advising and hosting students at my site for the 10 years that my agency has been in business. And there has been an absolute cliff drop in competency and critical thinking, not critical theory, critical thinking and self-assuredness, not to mention the theories that you all talk about. Nobody knows theories anymore. Nobody knows how to diagnose either in the last 3 to 5 years. And it's really been in the last 3. So I've seen the ripple effect now and the acceleration of this like hockey stick curve of wokeness, which I just call postmodern deconstructionism implemented into policy. To me, that's woke, coupled with gross incompetence because the academic standards have dropped also. So that's my story. I've seen it longitudinally across like 25 years now.
So when do you think
go ahead, Megan.
the switch took place? Like if you had to like mark it on a timeline.
Probably 2012-ish, 2012 to 2015.
Okay.
So for the next question, I want to start with Sean and Marina since y'all have to go early. But I feel like I see screenshots every day from these different, I was going to call them progressive Facebook groups, but they're really just like mainstream Facebook groups for therapists, but it's assumed you're progressive. They don't say this is a progressive Facebook group, but it's like, and we see this like every day if you're following this, that you cannot be a conservative and be a therapist. If you voted for Trump, you cannot be a therapist. you're like psychologically unstable and you don't have the right morals and values. This is just kind of, and it's not just these random people on social media either. This is coming from the ACA, the Marriage and Family people, National Association of Social Work. Like, it's encoded. You must support social justice, and we know exactly what they mean by social justice, right? So what do you say to the claim that you cannot be a conservative and a therapist?
Oh, I would address black and white thinking. I always comment on these comments on the Facebook. I always comment, I hope you're not practicing CBT, otherwise, or I hope you're in therapy yourself. It's my default answer because, like, isn't it black and white thinking?
I love so much that you
Right.
brought CBT into that.
Oh, but
Well,
that's
so
my
that's why
biggest
CBT is
problem.
racist.
That's what make me actually. I didn't care about politics until 2020, until I stuck at home with the kids. Then I started watching news and realized why people hate Trump, even though he didn't do anything bad to me. I had no idea what was going on until that time. But then I started watching news, and my biggest concern was all those maladaptive thoughts like labeling, like black and white thinking, like catastrophizing was going from the media. Everything we tried to teach our clients not to think, they were pushing. And also another my biggest problem with woke mindset is external locus of control. Like everyone else responsible for your mood. Everyone else responsible for what's happening with you in your life. You have no power and you just need to fight for your rights.
By the way, Marina, if I may jump in, I know Sean's got to go too, but I think it's not a coincidence that 2012 to 2015 is when it took off, because the 2013 is when the DSM-5 came out, and that's when they eliminated the defensive functioning from the DSM. It was in the 4. Defensive functioning is a psychoanalytic concept unto itself. And I've seen a slow erosion from the curriculum of psychoanalytic modalities altogether, because the students coming out now, just like, you ask them about any of it and they just look at you like they're a trout coming out of the water, the blank stare. They have no concept. They're like, I think I read about that one time. And it's like, it's really bad. And my theory on that is, if you can eliminate psychoanalysis, you can inject a sense of external locus of control, because there's no more personal agency if all you're doing is behaviorism.
Yeah. Another thing, now they call CBT as a gaslighting. I've seen it in a couple of
I just
pages.
saw something like that online.
Popular idea that, why we need care about what others thinking of us, because we know that we were marginalized all our life. So it's
Sean?
not my projection. It's they really hate me. Let's stay in that way of thinking so that other people can tell us what to think.
Sean?
So my response would be, because I've seen that. In fact, and I was told in a Facebook group that as conservatives we're oppressors when I dared to speak up about something conservative. So I've thought about that. Like, I took my grad school training very seriously, and being like aspirationally aiming for being that like unbiased person. I know we all have biases. It's going to come through, especially if you're doing like I'm a Christian. I'll integrate Christianity into therapy when people want it. But generally aiming to like get myself out of the way and have the session be about the client. Like, that's what I'm about. And I can work with people, meet with people of all different backgrounds, beliefs, politics, whatever. And so like my aim is to in as best as unbiased way I can, is to explore the client, how they think, how they reason, how they where their beliefs come from, and different things. And these things they interact with things going on in the culture. They interact with things that end up being political things, and now they're like these hot button things. And even still, I feel like as a conservative, because I'm not caught up with the liberal woke things, I think I can do better therapy because of it, because I'm not playing into victimhood mindsets and to oppression ideology sorts of things. Like, I want to empower my clients. I want them to be lifted up. We can examine things together from different angles. So I really want ideology to not be playing into how I'm doing therapy. And I know liberals will frame things like, well, like as if conservatives aren't empathetic to things. And like, I can be empathetic to all kinds of positions. It doesn't mean that it's almost like there's tiers of empathy or something. I can be empathetic to many sides of an issue, but then there's also other layers. There's layers of personal responsibility and consequences and different things like that that keep me from. It's why I don't. It's why I'm not on the left, because I believe in personal responsibility. So I don't know. I think that's my short take on that.
Yeah, I was the other day I was really bullied in a Facebook group for bringing up personal responsibility in response to immigration. Like, why not immigrants take some degree of personal responsibility? Not we should feel guilty for what's going on with them right now.
Yeah.
I think there's a very sick, unconscious function that a lot of therapists who fall into that, we'll call it leftist political camp, but it's the woke ideology. What they're doing is they're creating an inherent dependence, because if they can prescribe that the problem with the individual they're treating is external to the individual, the therapist then gets to be part of the ostensible solution to that, thus employing them in perpetuity. Oh, by the way, in a system that can never change, because you can't change systems, you can only change you, but you can't change you either. You need me to change you. So I guarantee myself a job because I've created a feedback loop where I have epistemic closure on the entire philosophy of the illness plaguing the individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
The savior complex.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very nice meeting you guys.
Good to
See you,
meet you,
Marina.
Marina.
Yeah, it's more than that, though. I think it's an unconscious function. If you try, it's been so well practiced and so well rehearsed and so well steeped into the psyches of the individuals who embrace this and embody it, that to try to bring up anything different begets the very defensiveness that we now don't even have in the DSM anymore, in the form of denial, repression, reaction formation, projective identification, and they're so into it that they can't be pulled out because they've already convinced themselves that they're right, and they've surrounded themselves with an echo chamber that tells them that they're right. So we're dead in the water. Like, there's literally no way out of this if the individuals who presumably say that they have the answers, and out of the same side of their mouth say, I'm humble and open to feedback, also refuse feedback based on their preconceived notions about who's giving it to them, right? Like I don't know where we go from here if we can't have a conversation. And I've seen some of those exchanges, and they are nasty, like unprofessional. Cannot believe they share my credential. And here's the crazy thing. I can see it from their side too. And they think I shouldn't have a credential, right? Like, so where do we go from here other than to just create a brand new structure and market ourselves differently? And for the record, like, I don't consider myself conservative because I don't even know what the word means anymore. I just really like individual freedom and autonomy, and I respect our ethics, and I hold them all in balance. And I love personal accountability, because at the end of the day, you are the only one who has full access to your thoughts, your cognitions, your emotional range, your affective functioning. Nobody else does. And if we start to invert that philosophy that has formed the root of this profession for these many years, we just don't need to exist anymore, because it's all for naught. It's worthless, and it becomes a grift.
And I
I've
like
got more
what Sean
soapboxes, but I'll
said.
put a pin in it there.
I like what Sean said about, he said he would argue that we make better therapists because we don't buy into all that crap, and we still tend to hold to the ethics that that we were taught of, so I live in Oregon, obviously blue state. 95, if you want to take out the teen and adolescent clients I see, of the adults, 90% of them are liberal. And I mean very like I would say woke liberals. The other 2 or 3 clients that I have that are not are conservative and deeply religious, and they specifically sort of sought me out because of that. My clients that are liberal, they have no idea how can I guess for the purpose of this discussion, because like Jake, I don't even know I don't even know about, conservative anymore, but they don't have any idea what my political belief in general is at all. And they also have no idea that I'm a deeply religious person, because it doesn't matter, because it doesn't show up in the session, because it's not about me. Like they have no clue about any of that, because there's no business for me to bring it up in there. Just like there's no business for me to tell them about really a lot of my life experiences, unless it adds value to what the client is going through, unless it is a necessity that they know that snippet part of something that I've experienced that's similar to theirs. And so you could probably ask any of them. They would either assume probably that I'm liberal simply because I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and apparently that's a requirement. Or they would say, I don't know. I have no idea. So
I think also too, just to add on there real quick, I think you're good at like self-disclosing only to heighten rapport. I think that's a great, wonderful rule by which we could live. But also you're in Oregon, and so that would be one of those echo chambers. Now, if you're in, McMinnville, Oregon, maybe it's a little different story. But when you're in a central, hub city, you're gonna invariably project onto whatever you see around you in the community, right? So if we hold neutrality and we can absorb those projections and realize it's not about us, then we do make better therapists. And when we don't, because we're infused with social justice, and justice is an action word, meaning we become activated and activists in the session, we can't hold neutrality because we've been told year over year over year in grad school and from our supervisors and our mentors that we must act on behalf of, which is what justice is. Then we inherently lose neutrality, and therefore we become not good clinicians. I'm not going to say they're harmful, but at minimal, they're just not very effective, right? Which I think is just a waste of money at worst. But
let's get Megan in there. Oh, good.
Wait, what was the question? Sorry.
I think this one originally was like,
what's your favorite lotion? No.
Yeah.
Progressive therapists assuming that you have to be progressive in order to be a therapist. Like you couldn't be a conservative because you don't hold the right values.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm in South Carolina. I have probably more conservative clients than liberal ones. For me, it's always other therapists in all of these continuing education courses or at the like professional conferences. And the only thing I've ever been told, I mean, there's like this kind of unspoken kind of vibe that we're all liberal here. The only thing that I've ever been told directly is that it would be unethical for me as a therapist who is pro-life to counsel young women with unplanned pregnancies, because I would inject my political beliefs into this and my religious beliefs into the situation, which I thought was rather ironic. Because
they can't even see the irony though.
Like, because if you flip it around, like I've never done that. But that's what they're doing with a lot of their stuff. So, that's been the hardest like part in South Carolina. It's like once it's kind of weird because there shouldn't, you would think South Carolina, it's a deep red religious state, but we're in this like weird cultural milieu where there is some like almost anti-Christian bias from other therapists who aren't also Christians. So like if I talk to another therapist who is also Christian, we jive, it's fine. But there's like a small group coming up who aren't Christian, and then they're like, you're going to inject Christianity into your therapy and that'll be unethical.
Yes. Yes.
And that
Yes.
strikes me as ironic and very odd.
I felt the same thing. And so gun owner, I don't know if you guys know, but it's a thing now. And I'm happy to draw more people out of the shadows. Same thing, right? There are these whispers in the groups, some gun crime would occur, some mass shooting, something like that, and then there'd be the epithets in the whispers about those people, right? And I'm sitting there going like, you guys, I'm sitting right here, right? Oh no, you don't know because I've self-censored, right? I didn't realize I was doing that until like way later. 2019, I met Mike Sedini, the founder of Walk Talk America. I had him on the Noggin Notes podcast, and I'd forgotten for years afterward until he reminded me. It's like, hey, remember when we first met and you said, hey, yeah, we can, I'd love to have you on my show, but we could talk all about your program, but please don't mention that I'm a concealed carrier gun owner. And I was like, no, I'd forgotten that. But that was my instructions to him. I was still closeted, even though I wanted to have the conversation. Same thing with Christianity. And at one point or another, I finally turned some corner where I went, you know what? Going to church is healthy. We have empirical research that suggests this. We know that faith combats anxiety because being able to embrace mystery is calming. We know this neurologically. We know it psychologically. I was like, I'm just going to start offering religion to people. And I'm atheistic to that. Like I follow Jesus in my private life, but I am agnostic to what you want to follow as long as you follow something, because something is better than nothing, because if you're unanchored, bad things happen psychologically. So I thought, how odd is it that they could teach us in grad school to use frameworks like the psyche altogether, and conscious and unconscious function, and thoughts that we don't even know exist. Like, what is a thought? Like, where does it even exist? Is it in the brain? I have no idea. Like, we presume it is, but we can use these abstract concepts and just teach those without even thinking about it, without ever considering that it may be offensive to somebody. But no. You don't teach that God stuff. It's like, well, why? What's the difference there? Both of them are constructs that have lack of proof but are assumed true. Why one and not the other? So as soon as I couldn't put the logic together, I just started doing it. I just offered people, I'm like, hey, what's your spiritual affiliation? You should have one. Like, I don't care what it is, but you should have one. I just directively say, this is healthy for you because I can tell you that your life's a mess and this probably could afford you some structure.
And what's funny about the religious thing is, I went to graduate school in 2016, 2017. I finished. And maybe again, it was because of the fact that I was at a Catholic college, and you didn't have to be Catholic to go there. Like, it was not a requirement, but most of the faculty was. A lot of things were centered around that. But they taught, they were like, it doesn't matter if you yourself as a clinician are religious. But if the person is, you need to incorporate that if they want, and you need to understand that this is a big part for a lot of people. Which was a switch, because before that, up until that point, it had been very like, you don't talk about religion in therapy, like you don't go there, you don't do that. And so, and it may have just been because of the type of school that it was. But I was, for me personally, I was like, this is important, no matter what that religious belief is, like Jake said, that's important to people. That's an anchor. That people need that. And so I was glad that they talked about that. because that was something that I always kind of was like, I don't want to have to shy away from that, in session with people, especially if it's important. They're gonna bring it up, and so yeah, I think that's great that you offer that, you throw that out there for people.
Well, and like 100% of the time they go, yeah, I should consider that. And then I dive in and I drop it like it's a seed plant. But there's I think there's a broader motif here about I keep banging on the postmodern thing because postmodernism in its general spirit is very effective at getting people out of binary thinking. You can poke holes in lots of things by saying, "Are you really sure?" Right? Are you really sure of that? Like you seem really certain, but maybe it's not true. Postmodernism taken to its end erodes everything that is true and real, right? So we can't have that, but we do. And that's what's pushed is that you don't know anything. The patient is in charge. They're the expert in the room. It's like, well, why'd they hire us? So the larger motif, I think, is that we've eroded our own credibility as bought and paid for professionals who've been solicited to give feedback to people. Maybe we don't give advice. Maybe we do, but I'm ambivalent on that too. I know we've been told repeatedly in grad school, you don't give advice, and I agree with that. We should not be telling people how to live their lives. But what are you paying me for if not to be given some feedback and direction and structure based on my many years of training and thousands of hours of experience? If that's not useful, then you're wasting your money, and I'm probably doing something unethical by taking it. So let's look at something like couples counseling. Just take it out of the religious political realm. I happen to have an opinion that couples who function well through intimacy. Intimacy requires vulnerability. I teach emotional functioning. I got a whole video series on it. Vulnerability requires risk. Risk is tough because most people don't want to invite pain because pain sucks. So we try to ameliorate risk. We try to eliminate our vulnerability, and then therefore we lose our intimacy. One of the most intimate things we can do is share finances. So if you want a really good, healthy relationship, my bias, open and honest, and I tell the people this, I say, put your finances together. If you're married and you're committed to each other on paper and in principle and in spirit, then there's no secrets. Just put all the money together. And you should see the looks that go across their faces. It's like, because I spoke something true and they know it's true and they've been hiding whatever they've been hiding, right? Okay, but I just gave them a directive. I said, here's my bias. I think you should do this if you want to increase your intimacy in your relationship, right? Again, professors and supervisors' heads would roll off their shoulders if they heard me saying things like that because it is anchored in something. It is directional. It is structured. And I think the overall motif of postmodernism is don't ever do any of that. And so we end up in this like fun house where we're mirroring off of each other's reflective projections and nobody ever gets anywhere. And it's like, well, no wonder we're all mentally ill because we're not anchored with anything. So I think now therapy's job is probably to provide structure to the aimless and wandering. And I don't particularly care what structure you take, but you better take some because that'll get you on some path. And where the woke crowd goes sideways is they will pretend that they're not offering structure, but they are in their own way, and then backpedaling and playing both sides of it, saying, I'm just deconstructing things, but I'm not allowed to reconstruct them because that flies in the face of my philosophy. But if I am going to reconstruct, I'm going to reconstruct it in the way that you're anti-racist and, whatever. So there's a very gaslighty sense going on with the woke that I think doesn't happen in traditional conservatism, which does have its roots in something. I mean, Sikhs are pretty conservative. Muslims are pretty conservative. It had nothing to do with Christianity or religion overall. Jews traditionally tend to vote left, or at least Democratic, but their overall family structure tends to be pretty conservative. So does their financial structure, right? So, like, it's almost an erosion of all that we've known for thousands of years to be true across time and humanity is getting deconstructed. Now, why we should ask that question if we really want to tackle the system. But the first thing is recognizing the symptomatology of it. And I think the symptomatology is to destroy it, to break down. And that's not good because people are already broken when they walk in the room.
Yeah. That the marriage thing come up recently. I was at a professional conference this past October, and I went to one of the couples counseling workshops because that's something I'd like to get into more. And with the few couples that I have worked with, like I have come in like off the top, straight up saying, you're coming to me for couples counseling. I am absolutely pro marriage. Um, your marriage is the client, not you as individuals. And I mean, we're here to work and do whatever it takes to make the marriage more functional. It'll be a little bit of you, man and woman, working together and becoming more functional independently, but mostly more functional together. So I go to this workshop and they're talking about couples who are in high conflict and how to help them like cooperate. And something come up and kind of triggered me to like voice that opinion of like, okay, like the marriage is the client, not the individual couples. Like short of domestic violence and severe abuse, like I really do think almost anything else could be fixed.
Yep.
And I think it's important to have that kind of viewpoint if you're going to be a marriage or therapist. Like, because people are coming because they presumably want their marriage to be fixed and worked out. And then the presenter and the rest of the class, I kind of felt like I got ganged up on, because the take was that some marriages are just so terrible that they can't be worked out, and it's just better off for the people to split up. And I would disagree with that, particularly if there's children. I think we are lying to ourselves and being very dishonest when we say, oh, kids are resilient, they'll be okay. I do have the rather controversial belief that if even for a time you do it for your kids, it might be worth it in the long run, and you might feel differently in a year or in 2 years or 3. And maybe it's worth it to stick it out through a hard time or two for your children. And that was very offensive, and deemed harmful to clients. So I kind of just shut my mouth and and hung out for the rest of the conference.
Megan, you could just advise what my professors have suggested. Just tell them to open up the marriage and try polyamory.
Ooh,
Well,
that never worked.
That's really happening.
That
Never
never
That's
worked.
really
That-
happening in
that-
the schools now.
That was in my marriage and family counseling program. We read a
Good
book called
Lord.
The Ethical Slut, which, I mean, the essence is like monogamy is kind of an outdated, backward religious concept, and you know, if you're still married to that idea, it means you need to do the work of overcoming your jealousy so you can kind of evolve to the point of polyamory.
Oh.
These people are sick.
Yeah. So,
These
but
people are sick.
also in this professional conference, the keynote speaker, during one of his breakout sessions, was doing a breakout session on counselor self-care, and talked about some of the things that had traumatized him recently. And of course, the election of Donald Trump and our country becoming more authoritarian, was on his like top of the list things that he is worried about and find. And so like here we are sitting in a professional conference. He is the keynote speaker, well known, written a lot of books, and that's the first thing he has to say in his little presentation. So it was, I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, but I'm like, oh, here we go again.
Rebecca, do you have any comments on that couples thing? Because I got a lot to say, and I don't want to like just hog the mic. I want to hear what you have to say. I know my own thoughts.
No, it's always kind of like funny because you see when you encounter these people in real life, like with the keynote speaker saying that, it's like you are almost shocked because it's like, no, these people are real. They're not just on the TV. Like these are people that are walking around that think these things, and it's like to allow yourself to be so bothered by something like to the point where it becomes your whole personality, that is just it's and these people are, and I think the part that bothers me is it's like, do we not see the harm that this is going to do to these clients that are in vulnerable positions anyway? Like maybe their problems have absolutely nothing to do with politics at all whatsoever, And you have this therapist who's like harping on these things, and like, and their whole world is wrapped up in that, and it's like, you're not listening. Like, there's no way that you can be listening to your client and treating them effectively when your whole world is wrapped up in this whatever universe that you've built, and you're gonna hurt people. You're gonna miss something really important with your client, and you're gonna hurt people. And we all, like, when I first started working in mental health, was back in 2006. So I was working in facilities, and there was always a saying like, you work here because you're a little bit crazy too. Like, that's why you're in these facilities, because we're all a little bit weird. We're all a little bit crazy. That's why we gravitate to this job. And I do think it's true that therapists, we tend to, a lot of times, you just sit down and talk to them. Maybe their sister was bipolar, and so they were drawn to this field because they wanted to help. Maybe they had their own like chaotic childhood where they were moving around all the time, and so they're like, I didn't have anybody. I needed a therapist to sit down and talk to, and I didn't have that. So they go into it. Most of us probably have a similar, maybe sort of reason as to why we were drawn to it. But up until probably 2015 or so, it was talked about in graduate school that it's like, if that's the reason why you're here, there's a lot of baggage that comes with that. And one of my professors said a long time ago, I think it was in a bachelor's class, she said, every good therapist has their own therapist. She goes, and what I mean by that is that all of the reasons why you came into this profession, all that baggage, you've taken care of already. You've already addressed those baggage things. And then also the fact that she's like, depending on, like, I specialize in first responders, PTSD, trauma. So I hear a lot of terrible stuff every single day. And she said, she's like, sometimes you need to, every few months or so, sit down with another professional and kind of get rid of some of this stuff, because it's just going to happen. You're going to end up with like secondary trauma if you aren't careful. And so it was kind of the standard back then that even if you had these reasons why you went into the field, you healed yourself first, because you knew that you couldn't be an effective therapist. And what it seems like now is that people are, whether they realize it or not, these therapists are gravitating towards this profession. And maybe it's because they genuinely are like, I had childhood trauma, and so I want to help these kids. But they have not done anything to heal themselves from it at all. And they are trying to heal themselves through working with these clients, and it's just not working. And they're making themselves worse. They're not good therapists. And they're hurting these really vulnerable people that are looking to them to help walk them through some of this stuff. And I think, and I realize that, like, social media, it's all kind of conglomerated into one place. And so maybe it seems like it's a bigger percentage than maybe it really is. But you see it on, Facebook, and you read some of these things, and it's like, these therapists are very sick themselves. And it's not just, the parallel process concept that we all experience. It is that these therapists are sick themselves. They're hurting themselves, and they think that they can go in and fix and help another hurting person. And they need to realize that this is not, you're wrong. You cannot help a hurt person if you have not healed from your own childhood trauma. I'm sorry, but a transgender therapist cannot effectively provide therapy to some 16-year-old kid who's already like struggling, whether it's a gender dysphoria they're struggling with or childhood trauma or whatever. They cannot effectively treat them because they've obviously got a lot of their own childhood trauma still hanging out.
That's a really controversial statement, right? Because the presumption is that if you've transitioned, you are arrived, and therefore there is no dysphoria, there is no disorder, right? Much like, active alcoholics should not be licensed because they're actively not handling their disorder. And we presume that when they're sober, they're helpful. But we've inverted the standards now. So, again, 2013, gender dysphoria started, they used the term assigned at birth in the description of gender dysphoria in the DSM-5. Nothing's assigned. Sex is observed, based largely on gonads, right? Like, nothing is assigned. You don't assign anything. So even the language warping began at that point. And, back to the couples thing and your keynote speaker guy lamenting his own whatever struggles he's having with the political theater. Rebecca, your point about how we're going to cause harm if we make it about our agenda, they literally don't see it that way.
Right.
They can't.
Yeah, they
don't. Think we're
They
causing harm by not making it political, because everything is political. That's how we're taught. I mean, Ryan's in school now. He knows that this is what you're taught, is you're to go in there and restructure the thinking systems of the person in front of you so that they're more aligned with the systemic oppression lens. That, like, there is no, I control my own response to Donald Trump. It's Donald Trump's doing this to me, and they cannot hear it any other way. And to bring it up any other way flies in the face of their narrative such that they'll tear down the very mechanism by which you're trying to help them see the light, which is CBT, right? Like, it's nuts. So, with the couples thing, I got taught the same way, which is the relationship, capital R, is the client or the patient, right? And I will make both of you uncomfortable to make sure the relationship succeeds. Now, and I just posted this on X yesterday or the day before. Good morning to all the people whose therapists aren't steering them into divorce. One of the lies I was told in grad school that now has become not just simply a throwaway phrase, but an actively pursued intervention strategy is sometimes the best thing is a good divorce. If you can't have a good marriage, sometimes the next best thing is a good divorce. That's a lie. That's a lie, right? Like, no, you fix the marriage, because the presumption is marriage can't be fixed. Now, we can have differences of opinion on whether or not a marriage can be fixed, and that may be a useful caveat for all of society. But in the therapy office, when the people sitting in front of you who have hired you for your interventions are there presumably to fix their marriage, you better not damn well say that. You can't. You don't get to, because that's not what they're there for. You don't get to offer that up and be like, well, maybe you guys are just better off separate. No, I'm hired to do a job, which is fix them. I'm gonna ride on the presumption it's fixable until proven otherwise. And we just don't talk like that anymore, because it's so much easier to destroy. It's just so much easier to destroy. And you say, maybe social media has compressed it all and it seems more prevalent than it is. I would disagree. I think it's an accurate representation of how present and pervasive the problem is, because I just counted up and it's like 8 that I've counted 8 in the last 12 to 16 months. Largely men. I think there was one woman. There were 7 other men who have graced my consciousness either professionally or personally through various means and modalities, who have said, my wife was in therapy individually, which, by the way, Zephyr has a policy. We don't treat couples individually and couples at the same time. You can have your individual therapy, that's fine. But if the topic starts becoming the spouse, it's draw the line, get the spouse in. We're not gonna treat somebody who's not here, because we have a large body of literature that suggests when you do things separately, you grow separately, and of course you separate. That's a good recipe for Splitsville. So they said, a therapist just continued to validate whatever the pain was in my wife's head, and eventually I got labeled a label, usually narcissist, and never got invited in the session. Next thing I know, wife's coming home saying, honey, I've got to leave you. I'm unhappy. I've been unhappy the whole time. Sorry, I never told you. And he's like, whoa, what? Like, over the last 12 years we've been married and our 3 kids, and like, where did this happen? And well, my therapist said, why don't we go have a talk with a therapist? I don't think that's a good idea, right? Like, it goes that direction. And 8 of them, 8, just me, 8. That's happened to me. And then they sit down and I, right the ship and we set the sails appropriately. And they go, well, it turns out it wasn't as broken as we thought. Yeah, it's because you're being fed a lie by somebody who's mentally ill, trying to offer mental health support out of their own unconscious projections about how terrible they feel. So they're going to destroy your marriage out of, whatever girl boss mentality, you do you, which is one of the bigger lies we can be told too. And it just leads to destruction. It's awful and it's pervasive and it's rubber stamped. It's unbelievable how often this happens.
And God bless you, marriage and family therapist. I don't do very much couples therapist, just couples counseling. It's not like my area that I really like. I do have a couple. I have a couple of couples.
A couple. So 4.
A couple couples. Two.
Couple squared.
Two couples. Two
Okay,
pairs
so
of people.
4.
Yes,
Okay.
4. So 4. That's 8. 4.
Are they coupled?
Okay.
Are they
Yes.
polyamorous? Have you
It's a
suggested
throuple.
that?
It's all together.
Have you met them? Okay.
Yes, I put them
You
all
should
together.
introduce
That
them.
was my suggestion. I suggested that for these
You
two
could probably
couples
cite
to save
Ryan's
their marriage.
research to do it.
Yeah, I suggested that was the way that I fixed it with these two couples. Is I said you should all 4 get together, and that will fix it.
By the way, did you guys see the
swap.
lady in, I think it was Japan, who married an AI?
Yeah.
Like legit. Yeah.
Oh,
Did you see that?
okay.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
No.
I don't even know how an AI
Yeah,
signs the
it's-
This
consent.
has,
Oh my
has this
God.
come into your office yet?
Not into mine yet. No, I've
Uh-huh.
seen it. And my best friend, she's also a trained therapist. And so we bounce a lot of this stuff where we're like, this is what's going to happen. I know that this is what's going to happen. Like, I can see this happening. And I think that kind of stuff is going to get more prevalent, I think.
Yeah.
What are they calling it now? Like
Yeah.
AI psychosis type of thing.
Are they though, or are we just waving it through because we dare not offend the whatevers, right?
See, and I don't buy that it's psychosis. I think my opinion, based off of just what I've seen and talking with some other therapists about it, is that I don't think that it's psychosis. I think that you have these people that want human connection, that they want to have this human connection, and the last 5 years, basically, all we've done is separate people, and we've said, no, you can't talk to them. You can't see your face. Now you don't have a fucking face because it's covered. And I think that you have these people that we've now developed this level of anxiety in them with having human interactions, but I think that they desperately want that companionship and these human interactions. And now you have this thing that they can use as replacement for that. And so I don't think that it's, I wouldn't necessarily call it psychosis, but I think that it's that now we also have people that we have therapists that don't want to challenge people on things.
Well, right. Well,
what you
believe. Go ahead.
It's what you think it is.
I've seen it twice. I wouldn't call it psychosis. I would say, in one,
That's not delusional disorder to you?
Very, very close. Tied in with some, I would say, borderline personality, where we get a little bit detached from reality. And we're very lonely, and we're really, really seeking connection, and kind of like a similar profile to the same person that falls into the transgender ideology. So if you're really curious about it and want to just go read what a potential client might come to you and say one day, there's a whole Reddit community with 20,000 users.
Of course there is.
They identify as fictosexual. And
Reddit is accessible.
yeah, you're just going to have to go down the rabbit hole, man.
What that means?
You're just going
Wait,
to have
can you
to go down the
define
rabbit.
victosexual?
Yeah. But I have also seen it not just with an individual person, but with a couple. And that gets really interesting because it's going to be with the individual, it was more like the same kind of people that fall into the transgender rabbit hole. That's the profile. With a couple, it's basically like a pornography problem. So for example, hypothetical, changing things for privacy and all. Let's say you get a call from a woman and she's like, my husband is addicted to pornography. You get that phone call a lot. Will you be my husband's therapist? Help him get over this pornography problem. Okay, fine. You come in. It's pretty clear he's not addicted to pornography. I mean, he's got a pornography use problem. But old school days, couples would role play, right? Well, so some couples would maybe try to use this as a way to spice things up. And if you create an alternative AI version of your spouse, you are going to have problems because they're not real. They're not real. Like, you're married, you have a real living, breathing person that you can be intimate and connect with. And like, not to kink shame you, but I think it's a terrible idea to go down that rabbit hole of role play.
Let me put my cynical hat on, because Ryan was just as agape as I was. I just masked it better, I think.
I'm pretty sure Ryan's head
here's my cynical hat.
needs to put his eyeballs back in his head. They're like, your eyeballs were popping out of your head there.
Megan, you bring up a great point. We have to address it, right? Woke doesn't let you address it. Woke says, let them do whatever they want, right? The presumption is that they're in front of us because they're ailing, and we forget that. We just chuck that right out the window. So I don't care what the ailment is. It's our job to find out. But then we're moving very rapidly down this path toward don't diagnose because it's harmful. Like, that's where we're going. Don't diagnose anything because it's harmful. Minor attracted persons, transgender is who I am. Now we've got this whatever victosexual, whatever it is. I don't particularly care what nomenclature it's given. It's unhealthy by virtue of the fact that they're seeking help. So at some point, whose job is it to draw the line and go, that's not healthy? It's not acceptable. Me, right? Because they're hiring me or you or whatever, right? We would presume, oh my gosh, but you've judged it. Yes, I have. I've judged it as being very terrible because you're sitting in front of me telling me how terrible it is. So I have to say, turn off your AI girlfriend.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Megan?
No, I'm sorry. You had a question. You probably want to ask it first.
No, well, I think this kind of goes to a broader thing. And Jake, the other last men's mental health podcast, I think we got into it with Dr. Patrick Lockwood. And he's very much coming from the perspective of like sex positivity, like no judgment, that type of thing. And I think the problem with that line of thinking is the client is the one saying, I have a problem. It's causing me distress. It's causing harm in my life, whether it's pornography or, sexually compulsive behavior, whatever it is. The client is saying, I think I have a problem with this. I don't like it. I want to change. And the therapist is saying like, no, this is a good thing.
Yeah. Like they wouldn't be sitting in
They're
front
arguing
of
with
you if they didn't want to, because that was one of the first things we learned in grad school is that clients come to experience change. And if you just affirm everything that they're doing, they're never going to change.
This is why affirming care is stupid. All of it.
What are we doing?
It starts with gender affirming, right? It starts with gender because it's like, I was born in the wrong body. It's like, okay, first of all, that's a spiritual, psychological thing that you can't possibly wrap your head around because it's a construct, like I described before. So that's dead on arrival as far as I'm concerned. Born in the wrong body is not even a statement worth making, right? You have no way of quantifying that. All right. But it starts there. Then it goes, so this is just how I am. I want you to send me down the path I've already predetermined. Here, please sign the letter to avoid the gatekeeping procedures in the medical community, et cetera, et cetera. And I go, not my domain. I just draw the line there. I'm not qualified to assess whether or not you're fit for voluntary medical procedures that will be life altering. Not going to do that. Okay. But then it creeps into, affirm other things. So mom comes in, my kid has ADHD. Excuse me, miss, I will be the arbiter of that because I possess the license from the state for diagnosing. I don't know where you got it in your head that your kid has ADHD. Well, the school counselor said so. School counselor in my state is not allowed to treat and diagnose, so I will be doing that. Let me interview you. Turns out he doesn't have ADHD. He's got diffuse boundaries at home, and his dad is never there, and that's why he's bouncing off the walls, because he's seeking attention and you're not giving it to him because you're working 75 hours a week with 4 other children. It's not ADHD. It's a family systems problem. It's actually you, mom. You need to get your home under control. No, you didn't affirm me. Tell me that I'm right? So this goes back to something Dr. Christian Conti, one of my friends and mentors, has said repeatedly over the years, which is people don't want your advice. They want your approval. So yeah, even though they clear their throat and raise their hand and sign the consent form, they don't actually want correction. Correction is painful. What they want is affirmation. And our grad schools are telling us to do that. Now it goes into this, like sex positivity and healthy at any size. And it's like healthy at any size is a load of crap too, because if you've ever interviewed anybody who's ever lost a bunch of weight, they never, ever, ever, ever want to go back. Like, don't give me that. Why are we pushing weight loss drugs if we're healthy at any size? Like, the whole thing is just completely inverted reality, and it's guano crazy. So as it continues to erode, the affirming care model will eventually invert our entire profession to rendering us bartenders and barbers, because we won't be able to give direction, guidance, advice, structure, because we'll be accused of things if we do, right? Like, that's where it's going if somebody doesn't put their heels in the ground real quick. Told you I had soapboxes.
So I want to shift gears a little bit, and it's kind of touches on a number of things that we've talked about, thus far. There's this mentality among progressive therapists of they're the kind ones, they're the empathetic ones, they're the compassionate ones. And the reason you can't be a conservative therapist is because conservatives are mean-spirited, and being like kind and empathetic is like the one, uncompromisable necessary condition to be a therapist, right? And I think, I don't know if you heard, I think it's Paul Bloom has empathy versus rational compassion. And the story I like to use, I had a friend who was a heroin addict, and every time he was dope sick and going through withdrawals, he would, Mom, I feel so bad. And his mother would give him money to go buy heroin, right? That, I think that's a very like progressive type of, empathy, kind of this knee-jerk niceness. Whereas like a more rational way to love that child to say, I know you're hurting and I'm going to let you keep hurting because I love you, right? What do you make of this claim that conservatives cannot be therapists because they lack compassion?
My first response to that is I'm not sure that's a thing anymore, because I haven't seen. I know everybody likes to punch down on the libs or whatever and be like, oh, the compassionate left. I haven't seen that claim for years. So I don't know that that's a thing that's not just kept alive for the purposes of punching bags. Like, I don't know that people talk like that anymore. Maybe they do, but I haven't seen it. Are you guys actually seen this?
I see it in grad school. I see it in these therapist Facebook groups. It's just that's I think in the therapy profession, I think that's common.
Okay. It's just not in my orbit then. But I mean, while I'm talking about, as well, share my 2 cents. Although they eliminated pennies, I guess I can't share my 2 cents anymore, can I? Yeah, so if you don't have, this is strict behaviorism. We could take this from many angles. Behaviorism says you reinforce the behavior, you can get more of the behavior. Extinguish the behavior goes away. How do you extinguish the behavior? Make it painful enough if they don't want to. You can do it a number of ways. Enabling it or reinforcing the behavior is not compassionate in the long term. I don't know how anybody could argue that unless they're not interested in the long term. They're only interested in the short term. And that's where you get things like harm reduction models, where the literal campaign or the program derives its funding off of the augmentation of the numbers of the people they serve. They are not set up to work themselves out of business. I am, because my identity is not therapist. But if a true homelessness intervention model or a harm reduction model or a suicide prevention model wanted to do some good, they would make sure that they work themselves out of a job. All harm reduction is doing is keeping people not dead and merely miserable. To me, that's malpractice if we do that in the office, but that's exactly what affirming care does. And that's exactly what, giving your dope sick kid money to go buy more drugs does. It keeps him in the pain loop without actually getting him out of it, because we can't stand to see him in distress because we can't tolerate our own distress, and on and on.
Megan, do you have something?
It left me.
Rebecca?
Sorry.
My bad.
No.
You asked me to do it.
You have some, Rebecca?
Well, I do think that there is this, like, I do see what you're saying, and maybe that's just because that it's kind of in my orbit, not like Jake was saying, not quite in his orbit. They do see this, like, you know, theory, I guess, that they think that we can't be, um, compassionate. And it's funny is like I feel like, because they talk about how, like, it's almost like every accusation is an admission, because most of the time, and the people that I see that are the ones, like us conservative therapists that are not supposed to be compassionate, and we don't have empathy, and we're not accepting, most of the time, those are the people that right off the bat are like, no, I'm so sorry about that. And, how can I help you? And just even in their personal lives. And so I kind of have to just sort of laugh a little bit, because I'm like, I see the exact opposite. Like, I see the people, us, that are supposed to be so judgmental and unempathetic and just terrible therapists. I see the total opposite of that in our daily lives,
Yeah. My retort would be, of course I'm compassionate. That's why I do this job. And unfortunately, I've come up on my time to spend with y'all this evening. So it was a pleasure, and I'll talk to y'all later.
So good to see you, Megan.
Bye.
Bye.
See you, Megan.
So I got a couple questions left. One is, there's this kind of mentality, I feel like, in the culture that therapy is something that progressives go to and conservatives don't go to. You've got like this progressive idea where everybody needs to go to therapy, everybody needs to have a therapist, everybody benefits from therapy. And on the conservative side, you got like Abigail Schreier with bad therapy and Matt Walsh talking about how therapy is a scam. And I'm afraid, because both progressives and conservatives have mental health needs, and I'm afraid we're coming to this position where progressives are over therapized, going to therapy when they really need other types of interventions in their life, and conservatives are not going to therapy when they might actually need that. What do y'all think of that?
Yeah. I think, I mean, like, just based off of my caseload, they're all, with the exception of a couple, really progressive. And so I think that the difference, though, as to why maybe you see more progressives going into therapy versus maybe some conservatives have said, conservatives, with the relationships that we have in our daily lives, tend to be a little bit different. They're not a sounding board. Most of the time, our friends, if they're a really good friend and we need those friends, they may be supportive and be like, yeah, that really sucked. Like, I'm sorry that happened to you. But also, really good friends will say, I'm sorry that happened, but you're kind of being an asshole. Like, what did you think was going to happen? And so we don't, progressives, and I don't want to necessarily make blanket statements, but if they're in a sounding board or in this echo chamber where their friends are like, oh my God, you need therapy for that. Like, you had this small inconvenience, go talk to the therapist. If they have people like that, it's like, your friends can handle that. You don't need me for that. Like, you had a minor inconvenience. You don't need to spend an hour with me talking about how you had this minor inconvenience. We've now spent more time talking about this inconvenience than the inconvenience was. You were inconvenienced for 10 minutes in traffic and it pissed you off. And we've now spent an hour talking about the 10-minute inconvenience. I do think there are a lot of, I do think that they're on the opposite end of it, though. You have conservatives that just refuse to do it. That's something that the weird liberals do it. And there are people that maybe do need, really do need a therapist. They're maybe they're veterans or first responders that don't want to do that for whatever reason. So I do kind of think that the stereotype is a little bit true, at least from what I've seen. That, but also, you don't need a therapist for everything. You don't need me because your coffee pot broke this morning. Like, you don't need me because you had, a customer give you a microaggression and a side eye at work. You don't need me for that. Go tell your friends. Like, go tell your friend about that. Go for a walk. Go get some exercise, drink some water. You'll feel better. And it's cheaper than spending money on me for an hour.
And there's a lot packed in there. Let's see if I can get it all out. Really need Ed Perrin here. So the first, I think, paradox there is the therapy all the time or no therapy at all binary, which I hate. Neither one of those extremes is good. But I think the pendulum largely swung too far from nobody gets mental health care to everybody needs a therapist, and that's become a thing, and it's been largely pushed by those online, therapist in a box companies, because that's their business model. Everybody gets therapy, so fill our coffers. In the middle somewhere is the idea that professional psychotherapy should, I think, needs to redefine itself. I've been posting about this lately. As by lately, I mean the last 24 hours. It's just been kind of top of mind. But I think we either need to be in the medical model and really be in the medical model and be taken seriously and treat these disorders as the disorders they are, or we don't. We become electricians and plumbers and pipe fitters and contractors and barbers and hairstylists, where we're hired to do a job and we do the job. And even then the job gets done at some point. But we either need to dive in and say, yeah, these things are functionally wrong and they're objectively interfering with your life. And we live by the book, and then we can build managed care and all that stuff and quantify our results. And there is a termination to this. Or we just hire ourselves out as consultants, which is fine too. And then we just do personal growth, and that's fine. And I liken it to physical therapy versus personal training. Physical therapy is where we largely dwell. Can we continue helping somebody get perennially better by gaining more insights? Absolutely. The growth is a thing. Growth through treatment is a thing. But ethically, we are compelled, and all the ethical codes say the same thing in different words. We only continue care so long as it's reasonably clear that the client or the patient is benefiting. Now, that can be very gray because it's very subjective, and the person shows up week over week over week and says, I love talking to you. It's really great for me. Okay, then what are we working on? There should be a goal, and the goal of self-awareness is an unachievable goal, because if you're a divine creature, you're limitless in your capacity, you're just never going to hit an arrival point. So that can become a grift if you're not markedly measuring your progression. So I think in some ways, I'm defending managed care here, which is very, very bizarre for me. They're right to expect results so they can terminate payment because the illness is now cured. Get off my books. And to Rebecca's point, go back into your communities and grow there with your home and your family and your friends and your coworkers and your colleagues and your clergy and all that stuff. The other end of the continuum, called consultation, will say, hire me whenever you want and I'll be there. And I still probably should abide by some ethical code, and that ethical code would be structured by a contract entered into by two fully consenting parties. And as long as you're happy and I'm happy and you're paying me the rate that I want and you think you're getting something out of it, electrician will come and rewire your house. He'll say, you don't need wires in your house. They're working just fine. The electricity travels through them. But if you really want me to pull all the wires and put new ones in, I will, right? You're paying me. So that argument can be had. And then the last thing I think is that regarding this liberal conservative thing, conservatives tend to be more masculine coded, even than women, yes. Then the progressives tend to be more feminine coded, even the men, yes. And so with that comes more feels on one side, more logic on the other. And the logic crowd tends more to solve its own problems, bootstraps, etc. And they also, because conservatives tend to be more about the family and the nuclear unit, they tend to lean in more into their tribe, so to speak. The progressives tend to be a little bit more independent. That's why they go to big cities, and they tend not to settle down into families. And so they tend to externalize and seek outside counsel for their issues. And there's nothing wrong with that. But in the conservative realm, you also do tend to get those tough guy professions because tough guy, right? And so the tough guys are in a structure in their occupations typically whereby asking for help for anything is frowned upon, even if it's a job to be done, because the presumption is that you're competent to do the job. And then we get to make fun of Mike over there, who's always asking for help with the wrenches or whatever. Now, if Mike actually has like a psychological issue, he's going to go ask for help. Well, Mike's weak and Mike's stupid, and we make fun of Mike. Not to mention the actual lack of promotability if you are deemed medical. See, now we're getting to the medical thing, medically disordered, but with a depressive disorder or an anxiety disorder, and you carry a firearm for a living, or you're expected to rescue people out of burning homes for a living, or you want to fly jets for a living. And now where's the trust go, right? If we're not anchored well into the medical profession and say with relative certainty that you're healed and you're functional to go back to work to resume the duties that you previously had, like we would with a broken arm or an ACL repair, what are we doing? We can't just keep these people on the books in perpetuity because growth, right? That doesn't help the career guy who's going to be passed over for promotions because he's deemed incompetent. So we have to have a real reckoning within our profession to be able to address some of these concerns, because the stigma is quite real out there still for the first responders, the EMTs, the firefighters, the police, the corrections officers, the military personnel, both active duty and retired. And they tend to be more conservative, of course, but I think there's many overlaps in the Venn diagram that we're dealing with here.
So, do you have some, Rebecca?
No, I was just agreeing, but I have like 10 minutes or so, and then I'll have to get off.
Okay, cool. So last question is, y'all are, whether you say conservative, libertarian, classical liberal, heterodox, independent, you're different from the mainstream of the field.
Fictosexual.
Yeah. You're different from the mainstream of the field. What about mental health do you think that the average person should know that they're not getting from the mainstream?
Not everything needs a diagnosis. Not everything needs a diagnosis. Just because you're having a hard time focusing doesn't mean that you have ADHD. Just because you like things lined up a certain way in your closet, you like to color coordinate it, and you don't like being around people, maybe people annoy you, doesn't mean you're on the spectrum. By that classification, I guess I am too, because I have my preferences with socializing, so it's like, just, it does not everything needs a diagnosis. You could be struggling with focusing that day, or for weeks you've noticed that you're struggling. Doesn't mean that you have ADHD, and that doesn't mean you need to go to the doctor and get on Ritalin. Like, not everything is a diagnosis. You don't need a diagnosis. And unless you are a trained therapist, please, sort of like Google, if you're not a doctor, don't get on WebMD. If you're not a trained therapist, do not open up the DSM and try to self-diagnose. Please stop self-diagnosing, because you are most likely wrong.
Can you tell that to managed care, please? Because we still are the only medical profession that doesn't get reimbursed for preventive care.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice. To get people help, just a little nudge, pop the hood, check the belts and hoses 4-6 times a year. That would be great. Pay me a couple $100 here or there, and prevent yourself from paying out thousands. Like, this seems economically literate to me. What do I want people to know? I want people to know that they're not getting from the mainstream therapy culture, we'll call it. Mental illness can and should be overcome. And I want to work myself out of a job. If I manage to cure all mental illness in Northern Nevada and all parts far and near, and no one is ringing our phone anymore, and it's for the right reasons, not because I did something foolish, but if we actually healed everyone, and there were no more bullying incidents on the playground, and no more couples in distress fighting at the grocery store, and there's no more domestic violence, there's no more suicide, and I still had years left on this lease, I would gladly turn it into a brew pub and coffee shop to pay the bills. Because my identity is not therapist. My identity is something much larger than that. Therapist is what I do for a job. I'm very passionate about it. I'm very good at it. I try to make other people very good at it. I want to augment the profession, but if the profession collapsed tomorrow for the right reasons, I would be perfectly fine. And I want to send that message. This is why I give a lot of shit away for free, like podcasts and YouTube videos and articles. I want you to take what I have learned in grad school over these many, many tens of thousands of hours of experience and implement it into your own kitchens and workspaces so you stop coming through my door. That's what I want. And people should overcome this, because if it's not overcomable and it's an identity, then our profession ceases to exist because we can't fix anybody.
Awesome. Jake, Rebecca, wonderful conversation with you guys. Love talking to y'all.
Yeah, it's good to meet you guys.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye.
Yeah.